Just a minute or two. Okay, nobody yet, but it's been over a minute, so we'll just go. 3 John, verses 9 and 10. I wrote something to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first among them, does not accept what we say. For this reason, if I come, I will call attention to his deeds, which he does, unjustly accusing us with wicked words. And not satisfied with this, he himself does not receive the brethren either, and he forbids those who desire to do so and puts them out of the church. Okay. What do we think about Diotrephes? You know why nobody ever named their son Diotrephes?
For more than one reason.
There's a lot of Johns out there, but
The NIV says he was gossiping maliciously about us. He was definitely a hindrance to the cause.
he certainly was.
He must be that strong-willed because the rest of the church doesn't stand up against him and kick him out. And that's what should happen.
And sometimes we look at kind of the way groups function, and we wonder why they go a certain direction or why one person is able to do the things he or she is able to do in those groups. It probably didn't become that way in a short period of time. It probably evolved and grew into that. And then it can be very difficult to change what is the course that a group is following. And there was a news story, one of those, they go back 10, 20 years later and look at a famous murder case and dig up all the side stories and all that. And I believe it was Skidmore, Missouri, which is up in extreme northern Missouri, which if you've never been there, it's a pretty isolated place. You get north of Kansas City and you get into a whole bunch of nothing pretty quick. And there was one guy there that, I can't remember his name, but he had kind of a little bit of an organized crime ring going, and he was just a big bad thug, and everybody was scared of him, and he killed some people that stood up to him, and he just kind of ran roughshod over that whole town. And he got convicted finally, and somehow or other was out on bail, I think after pending his appeal somewhere, which is very rare. Once you get convicted, you usually go to jail. Your appeal can go forward while you're sitting in jail. But he was out on, I believe this is the story, he was out on bail pending his appeal. And he was right back to his rough rousing ways. And he came into town, and somebody in cold blood, I guess you could say, somebody just shot him down and killed him right in the middle of the street. And they brought the FBI in, the state police in, investigating, and nobody knew nothing. I mean, it was the whole town was full of Sergeant Schultz from Hogan's Heroes. I know nothing. So it was a case of everybody there probably knew what happened and was glad it did. But it's never justifiable for murder. But when you're a murderer yourself, I mean, you take up the sword, you die by it, I guess. But leadership in the church is, in a sense, very much a life or death situation. I mean, people come to us broken, If they're going great in life, they're probably not coming to us. And so they come here broken. And if they don't experience love and honor and compassion for them and for everyone else, they don't hang around too long. And the thing about Diotrephes is his situation. John in his previous letter warned about false teachers, and he has been decrying them. And even in the first letter, you don't fellowship with these false teachers. Check out their deeds. Look at this and make sure you can know they're false teachers and all of that, and then don't have anything to do with them. And so it's not like Diotrephes' actions in and of themselves are inherently evil. They are evil and will be opposed by the disciple whom Jesus loved because of how he is doing those things, where he is doing them, how he's applying this form of discipline, this form of checking people and being oppressive in that regard. Someone who is standing up to and really shunting the work of the Lord. And John has judged him, I guess you could say. It's out of selfish ambition, isn't it? And that's usually when someone is running roughshod over everything else. It's not because they really want to see the group succeed. It's not because they have the best intentions at heart for the group. It's because they have some selfish motivation to do it. That's what's pushing them and driving them forward. And that's putting yourself forth, and you're killing other people along the way. You don't care who you destroy along the way. And you can justify it as, I'm sticking up for the truth. Well, what you think is the truth, or what serves your interest as the truth. If you're opposing John, kind of in historical perspective, and you would think even in contemporaneous perspective, if this was really the Apostle John, you wouldn't think anybody would say, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But maybe they were just so democratic. And we can be democratic too. The churches of Christ are pretty democratic. Everybody has a voice. I mean, when you have lay leadership, when you have elders that are members of the congregation, that know everybody, and everybody has their phone number, you better believe they get phone calls when somebody's not happy. And they have to answer to them and respond to them. But the Bible and the church is not a democracy. It's a kingdom. And sometimes what's popular isn't what's right, and sometimes what's right isn't very popular. But here's John, a true disciple, a true apostle, if ever there was one. We can't be certain, absolutely certain he wrote the letter, but there's no reason to doubt it. And he's running into this flack. He's getting all this pushback. He's not just, Diotrephes isn't just, and that's what happened. You get emboldened with all this, I'm not going to name the name of the church or the preacher or anything involved, but there's a church in King County where the preacher got really sick. And we'd been there, Sharon, I've been there a couple of times. And through a friend, I got a name of one of the elders, and I reached out to him and said, while your guy's sick, if you need some help filling the pulpit, let me know. I'll come down and help. And great, fine. That sounds like a really good thing. Then the preacher heard about it and nixed it right there. His vote was more, not because of anything he knew or thought about me, it's because he didn't know me. He didn't want a message that he couldn't sign off on potentially coming out of the pulpit. You had to meet his standards before you could speak there. And there were some other things. And the guy's a good preacher. I've heard him preach a few times, and he's very talented. I'm not knocking him as a preacher. But that type of mindset is very troubling The church as a body needs to be able to function if one of its members is not able to go right now. And if he'd been there for a long time, if your elders don't know the gospel after you've been preaching there for 15 years or whatever, whose fault is that? So, and what is the danger in maybe hearing things from a different perspective? Are your points so fragile, they can't withstand a little consideration, a little shaking up, a little refinement? So, there's this Diotrephes has crossed the line, and it's one thing to zealously and passionately lead and want to be a servant. Again, this is a line with which John is familiar, because John has crossed that line too. John and James sought to be first among the disciples. They were already very privileged. I mean, when they go up to the Transfiguration, Peter, James, John. They were already very much, among a small group, they were in the inner circle. And that wasn't good enough. I mean, they're brothers. Why do we got to bring Peter along all the time? That smelly fisherman. And, of course, they were fishermen too, but you should hear what Peter says when he's out on the golf course. I mean, you can, he had a potty mouth sometimes. It's, this is something John has seen because John has done it. And now John has learned and grown past it, and he's encountering it. And he's the right guy for the job to encounter it, to deal with it, and to put someone who probably has a great deal of power within that group in his place. To put Diotrephes, what he's doing is he is accomplishing the work of false teachers. When you oppose true teaching, you're accomplishing the work of the false. You're making sure all people hear is false teaching. So, I think if you're in ministry, or anybody watching, anybody here ever is in ministry or whatever, I think it's a really big consolation to know that John faced this. To know that if John, exiled, abandoned, the disciple whom Jesus loved, got a lot of flack along the way, then everybody, you can expect it. It's going to come your way. So, Diotrephes is, like I said, not a name. You don't see people pick biblical names for their kids all the time. They don't pick Diotrephes. By contrast, we have a guy named Demetrius, verses 11 and 12.
Just before you go,
Yes, sir.
So last week you were talking about, being hospitable, welcoming, generous, those kinds of things. We talked about those same kind of things for our own group. This day was kind of the opposite. And unfortunately, the loudest voices can kind of define the group, or at least those loudest voices are what people tend to remember. I think there's a real lesson in there for us.
It's a good lesson because Gaius is commended for his hospitality, but Diotrephes is inhospitality. His greediness, his selfishness is, almost more powerful than Gaius. Gaius can't be hospitable enough to overcome Diotrephes. And at least that's kind of how the whole thing reads. It's, you may not know it. I've read a lot about weight loss. I don't implement it very well, but I've read a lot about it. And I've heard a lot of trainers say, you can't out-train a bad diet. If you want to lose weight, you have to eat right. Diet is like 80 or 90% of it. The 10% of exercising is very important. It's absolutely essential. But you can't train so hard. And if you ever go to the health club and you get on one of the machines and they tell you how many calories you burn while you're dying on the treadmill or the Stairmaster, you're ready to, you hope you die. It would be an improvement if you died. And you look up and you burn 17 calories, and your lunch was 1,700 calories. So you can't out-train a bad diet. We cannot out-welcome unwelcoming presences. It's important that we realize that there is a time to shun people. There's a time for everything. There's a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to shun, embrace. There's a time. I think it's very rare. And I think it's usually after you've at least gotten to know them. But you cannot, and we have been talking about welcoming a lot. And to me, when you talk about evangelism, too long it's been put forth as almost sales, almost making people buy eternal fire insurance even if they don't want it. And I think evangelism today needs to be more, particularly about a group that is trying to authentically follow Jesus Christ. It needs to be a shared experience with people that aren't sharing it right now, welcoming them in. And it is hard. It is difficult. It is so difficult to be around people that do not behave like you behave, were not raised like you were raised, listen to music you wouldn't ever listen to. Some of these people that come in here, they don't even know who Hank Snow is. It's pathetic. I'll have to educate them slowly. It's hard when you're a cappella. You can't, but it is difficult to engage the other. That's kind of the trendy term for them. There's always a term for everything. The other, someone who is different than you. It is difficult. It is uncomfortable. But the cross was uncomfortable. And Jesus endured it for you. And putting up with maybe hairstyles or clothing or decorations, physical decorations we don't particularly care for, is a small price to pay compared to what was paid for us, I think. So, hi, Nell. Hope you're doing okay. And so is Robin. Hope you're doing good. I hear you've already found PD a new job. I hope he takes it. So, she's good to have her there. Hope to see her tomorrow. Moving on to Demetrius 11 and 12. Beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. The one who does good is of God. The one who does evil has not seen God. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself, and we add our testimony. You know that our testimony is true. So the flip side of Diotrephes, the exact opposite, is Demetrius. And you do run into a Demetrius every now and then. Not too much in America, but you'll hear somebody in Europe named Demetrius sometime. But, at times we can worry too much about what other people think of us, but that doesn't mean our reputation is meaningless. And when people generally think good things about you, that should mean something. It's not the end-all, be-all, and maybe it calls for further investigation. But it is tough. It's tough to lead a church if you have a bad reputation in the community it's located in. If people think you're no good and you're an elder, it's like the congregation is always having to at least explain that, always having to justify that. So it comes from a place of relevance, if not determination. If it doesn't make the difference, it's something still to be factored in and considered. And it also shows that Gaius is, as much as he's been commended, perhaps he's an impressionable person. And Demetrius, with his goodness, is to be modeled and followed more, and not just more, but follow him and do not follow Diotrephes. Do not follow, do not imitate what is evil. And maybe how Diotrephes got his position of authority is through, charisma. He's maybe good looking or whatever. He's a likable person. People are drawn to him. And he uses that to advance his power to the destruction or to the harm of the church. And instead of being influenced by Diotrephes, Gaius is encouraged to be influenced by Demetrius. Any other thoughts on those two verses?
Well, you touched on it lightly, but, you bring up the country singer, you bring up the old westerns and stuff. A person's name was all they had. And if you ruin their name, they were out of luck, It was bad. It was hard to get your name back. That's obviously still the case, and now it's even harder with the internet and all of that kind of stuff. If you're to try and get it back, even if it wasn't true, to try and get it back, it's just not easy.
There was a time where you could move and start over again. Maybe you'd made some mistakes and you knew you could never live them down in that community. Sometimes people need to forgive and aren't very forgiving. So you move to a new place and start over, a new life. And you could do that then. It's very difficult now. And it's just part of what we deal with. But it's... Diotrephes and Demetrius are, I guess everybody's an example. Some people are an example of what to do, and some people are an example of what not to do. And Demetrius is what to do, and Diotrephes is what not to do. And to some extent, their reputations justify that. Okay. Verses 13 through 15. I had many things to write to you, but I am not willing to write them to you with pen and ink. But I hope to see you shortly, and we will speak face to face. Peace be to you. The friends greet you. Greet the friends by name. I should have mentioned also, it's thought that Demetrius is the one actually carrying the letter. That's why he's mentioned as an example. So John Wright wraps it up. Similar to 2 John, this pen and paper, I think he says, in one, and pen and ink. Yeah, pen and paper and ink, and 2 John and pen and ink, and 3 John, basically the same idea but slightly different word choice. Again, a very personal letter that John, just like the second letter, John is anticipating coming to them in person, and kind of maybe setting some things in order when he gets there. And he's going to do that with Gaius too. So maybe Gaius is one of those chosen children of the lady in 2 John. It's hard to tell. Any other thoughts? And we were going to close early tonight and do something a little special, but you got to be here to see it. Hi, Ken.
Just real quickly, there are times when it's better to have discussions in person.
Oh.
So you can, because either in writing or over the phone, you miss the person's reactions. And sometimes you see immediately, oh, they didn't understand what I said, what I meant, or I didn't say this right because of their reaction. Whereas if you're doing that over the phone or in a letter, you can't immediately fix that.
It's it's similar with text. Sometimes a call is a lot better than a text. Sometimes a text is better than a call. I mean, I've really gotten to where I prefer to text people because I can say what I'm going to say and I get it out there. They can respond to it at any time in any way. but there is some subtleties, some nuance that is lost in texting, and same thing over the phone versus in person. So right now, personal contact is very limited for a lot of us. So we do the best we can.
But I can see where he says, I got stuff to tell you, but I need to do it in person. And I've been there, done that.
Let's hope he was able to make that journey. Okay, we have a little thing going on here. Sorry, you folks online, to have you excluded, but maybe next year you'll come. Huh? No. We're glad you joined us. We wish you could be here. This is something we need to do here. So, Mr. Waite, will you lead us in a closing prayer? Yes, now it's Turkey Day. We're not eating turkey without you, I can assure you.